What separates great leaders from the rest? It's not just intelligence, charisma, or even opportunity. It's something far deeper, something the Stoics understood centuries ago. Picture Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most revered leaders, standing at the helm of an empire, yet his greatest strength wasn't his power, it was his vision. The Stoics called it prohersis, the clarity of purpose that guides every decision, every action with unshakable intent. That's the secret. Leadership isn't about reacting to the world. It's about shaping it with unwavering focus and resilience. And here's the thing, this isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a blueprint for anyone who wants to lead with confidence today, whether you're running a team, a business, or simply your own life. Think about the last time you felt truly in control, not because everything was perfect, but because you knew exactly what mattered. That's the power of Stoic vision. It's the ability to cut through noise, to see beyond distractions, and to act not out of fear or ego, but from a place of deep conviction. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. Marcus Aurelius faced wars, plagues, and betrayals, yet his journals reveal a mind so steady, so focused, that even chaos couldn't derail him. How? Because he mastered the art of emotional mastery, turning obstacles into fuel for growth. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together, how you can harness this same mindset to become the kind of leader who doesn't just succeed, but inspires. This isn't about memorizing quotes or pretending to be unshakable. It's about building a framework for leadership that's as practical as it is profound. Over the next few minutes, we'll break down the 3 pillars of Stoic vision: focus, resilience, and emotional mastery. You'll learn how to sharpen your purpose like a blade, how to stand firm when everything feels uncertain, and how to lead not just with authority, but with authenticity. Because true leadership isn't about titles, it's about the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. So if you're ready to step into that role, to lead with the kind of clarity that changes everything, let's begin. A Stoic leader sees the world differently, not as a series of random events to react to, but as a canvas where purpose meets disciplined action. At the heart of this mindset is a simple but revolutionary idea from Epictetus: focus only on what you control and let go of what you don't. Sounds obvious, right? Yet how often do we waste energy worrying about opinions, setbacks, or external chaos? The Stoic leader flips this script. They pour their effort into their own choices, their own character, while accepting the rest with unshaken calm. That's how you avoid reactive leadership, the kind that's driven by panic, ego, or fleeting emotions, and instead act with intention every single time. Seneca put it best: a person's greatest wealth is the ability to live with themselves in harmony. Think about that for a second. True leadership starts with self-mastery, not control over others. When you're anchored in your values, no storm can knock you off course. Take the modern example of a CEO navigating a company crisis, say, a sudden market crash or a public relations disaster. The ones who inspire trust aren't those who scramble to blame or make grand promises. They're the ones who respond with measured clarity, who communicate transparently, and who focus on solutions rather than finger-pointing. That's Stoic vision in action, seeing the path forward without being clouded by fear or pride. Now, reflect on your own experiences. Can you recall a moment when you reacted impulsively, maybe out of frustration or insecurity, and later regretted it? Compare that to a time you paused, assessed the situation, and responded with purpose. Which outcome served you better? The difference between those 2 moments is the essence of Stoic leadership. It's not about suppressing emotions, it's about channeling them into something constructive. every challenge, every obstacle becomes an opportunity to practice this discipline. Because when you lead from that place of clarity, you don't just make better decisions, you inspire others to rise to the same standard. Clarity of purpose isn't just about setting goals, it's about digging deep to uncover the why behind every decision you make. The Stoics believed that without this foundation, even the most ambitious leader is like a ship without a rudder, drifting wherever the wind takes them. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly in his Meditations. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That question cuts to the heart of Stoic leadership. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what aligns with your deepest values. Think of it as a filter. When you're clear on your principles, distractions fade, and every action becomes intentional. History offers a striking example in Cato the Younger, a Roman senator who became legendary for his refusal to compromise his integrity, even when it cost him power. When Julius Caesar was rising to dictatorship, Cato didn't just oppose him. He lived his opposition, wearing simple clothes, sleeping on the ground, and rejecting bribes. To Cato, leadership wasn't about winning. It was about standing for something so firmly that his very presence shamed those who lacked conviction. That's the power of clarity. It turns values into armor, making you immune to the petty politics and short-term thinking that derails so many. But here's the challenge: clarity isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily practice. Just as Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself, you have to continually revisit your why. Ask yourself, what kind of leader do I want to be when no one's watching? What legacy am I building, not in titles or achievements, but in the way I treat people and face challenges? The moment you stop asking these questions is the moment you start drifting. Try this exercise today. Grab a piece of paper and write down your top 3 leadership values. Not the ones you think you should have, but the ones that truly guide you when the pressure's on. Is it fairness, courage, compassion? Whatever they are, keep them close. Review them every morning and let them shape your decisions, because when chaos hits, and it will, you won't have time to philosophize. You'll fall back on what's already etched into your character. That's how Stoic leaders turn uncertainty into opportunity, by knowing exactly who they are long before the test arrives. The difference between a leader who wavers and one who stands firm often comes down to this simple habit. It's not about being rigid or unchanging. It's about having a compass so reliable that even in the storm, you know which way to go. And here's the beautiful paradox: the more clarity you have about your own purpose, the more freedom you'll feel. Because when you're no longer pulled in a dozen directions by external pressures, every choice becomes an act of conviction, not confusion. That's the Stoic secret to leadership that lasts. The way we see the world doesn't just shape our reality, it determines how we lead. The Stoics had a radical idea: what happens to us matters far less than how we choose to interpret it. Epictetus put it bluntly: it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. Think about that for a moment. 2 leaders can face the same setback, a failed project, a missed opportunity, and walk away with entirely different outcomes. One sees disaster, the other sees a lesson. That's the power of perception at work. It's not about denying difficulty, it's about refusing to let difficulty define you. Take the story of Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, who was rejected by countless manufacturers before one finally took a chance on her idea. Most people would have seen those rejections as proof they were wrong. Sarah saw them as stepping stones. She even reframed her fear of public speaking by telling herself, "These aren't strangers judging me, they're just friends I haven't met yet." That's Stoic reframing in action. It's not blind optimism, it's strategic reinterpretation. Every obstacle carries hidden value, but only if you're willing to look for it. Now contrast that with reactive leadership. Ever watched someone spiral after a minor criticism or lose focus over a small delay? That's what happens when perception is left unchecked. The Stoics warned against this. They called it assent, the instant, often unconscious agreement we give to our first emotional reactions. The leader who snaps at a team member over a mistake isn't just failing their team, they're failing their own potential. Because every challenge is a test, will you see yourself as a victim of circumstances or the architect of your response? Here's the practice. Next time you hit a wall, pause and ask, what's the other story here? Maybe that frustrating delay is extra time to refine your plan. Maybe that rival's success is proof your market has potential. The facts don't change, but your relationship to them can. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. Our brains are wired to seek patterns, and when we consciously redirect those patterns toward growth, we're not just thinking differently, we're leading differently. So look at a challenge you're facing right now. What if it's not a barrier but a training ground? What if it's preparing you for something far greater? That shift in perception doesn't just ease the struggle, it unlocks a hidden dimension of leadership. Because when you stop seeing problems and start seeing puzzles, you don't just endure storms. You learn to dance in the rain. Emotional resilience isn't about shutting down your feelings, it's about mastering them so they don't master you. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who counseled emperors, put it perfectly. Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Think about that. The real damage often isn't the slight or setback itself. It's the emotional storm we unleash in response. And here's the good news. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become emotionless. It teaches you to temper those emotions like a blacksmith forging steel, transforming raw heat into something unbreakable. One of the most powerful tools for this is the pause. Before reacting to a provocation, take a single breath, just one. In that tiny space, you create room for choice. A coach facing a controversial call during a championship game doesn't scream at the referees. They pause, assess, and channel that energy into adjusting their strategy. That's emotional resilience in action. The Stoics called this prosouch, mindful attention to your inner state. It's not about suppressing anger or frustration. It's about recognizing those emotions before they hijack your decisions. Consider a leader who receives harsh criticism in a public meeting. The immediate reaction might be defensiveness or embarrassment, but with that pause, they can ask, is this feedback true? Even if it's delivered poorly, is there something here to learn? That shift turns a moment of tension into an opportunity for growth. The criticism doesn't change, but its power over you does. Now, let's make this personal. What's your emotional trigger? Is it feeling disrespected, facing unexpected delays? Maybe it's when someone questions your competence. Whatever it is, name it, because awareness is the first step to mastery. The next time that trigger gets pulled, don't let autopilot take over. Pause. Breathe, ask yourself, what's the most constructive way forward? This isn't just theory, it's a practice. Start small. The next time you're cut off in traffic or interrupted in a meeting, notice the heat rising. Then choose to redirect it. Maybe that frustration becomes fuel for a more focused response, or maybe it's a reminder to let go of what you can't control. Every time you do this, you're not just managing emotions, you're rewiring your leadership instinct, because the greatest leaders aren't those who never feel anger or doubt. They're the ones who have learned to use those feelings as signals, not sentences. Imagine a ship captain in a storm. The waves don't vanish because they're calm, they steady the rudder. That's the gift of emotional resilience. It doesn't remove life's chaos. It gives you the tools to navigate it with clarity, one deliberate breath at a time. Decisive action is where Stoic vision meets the real world, where clarity becomes courage. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be." Be one. That urgency wasn't just poetic, it was practical. The Stoics understood that vision without action is just daydreaming. Think about the last time you knew exactly what needed to be done, yet hesitated. Maybe you overanalyzed, sought one more opinion, or waited for perfect conditions. Now contrast that with George Washington at the Delaware River in 1776. His army was outnumbered, freezing, and demoralized. Retreat would have been understandable, but he didn't call another meeting or demand more data. He acted. That midnight crossing didn't just change a battle, it changed history. The difference between Washington's moment and our modern hesitation: Stoic discipline. Analysis paralysis isn't about lacking information, it's about lacking resolve. The Stoics called this acrasia, the gap between knowing and doing. And here's the irony: the more we delay, the heavier the burden becomes. Like a soldier who hesitates mid-charge, indecision drains momentum. But disciplined action, it creates its own energy. When you move with purpose, obstacles shrink. Opportunities appear. Consider a leader you admire, someone who makes tough calls look effortless. Chances are they've mastered this balance, gathering just enough input, then committing fully. Steve Jobs didn't poll consumers before creating the iPhone. Rosa Parks didn't form a committee before staying seated. They saw clearly, then acted without looking back. That's the Stoic secret. Decisiveness isn't recklessness, it's trusting your preparation enough to leap. So where's your Delaware River? Maybe it's a career move you've overthought for months. A difficult conversation you keep rescheduling, or even a small daily habit, like finally setting boundaries or starting that project. Identify one area where deliberation has become avoidance. Then ask, what's the cost of waiting, not just in time lost, but in the erosion of your confidence? Every unmade decision is a silent vote against your own agency. Washington's troops didn't cross the river because they were fearless. They crossed because their leader's certainty outweighed their doubt. That's the power you wield when you pair Stoic vision with action. Not every decision will be right, but indecision is always wrong. Because in the end, the water is never as cold as you fear, and the other shore is closer than it seems. Great leaders aren't born in moments of crisis, they're forged in the quiet consistency of daily practice. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Epictetus, the philosopher who rose from slavery to become one of Rome's most influential teachers, put it plainly: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. That's the essence of Stoic discipline. Leadership isn't built in grand gestures, but in the small, repeated acts that shape character over time. Take the ritual of morning and evening reflection. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for publication. He scribbled them at dawn and dusk as reminders to himself, a practice as deliberate as sharpening a blade before battle. Imagine starting each day not by checking emails, but by asking, what's one thing within my control today? And ending it not with mindless scrolling, but with, where did I act with courage? Where did I fall short? These aren't just questions, they're the scaffolding of self-mastery. Consider the routine of a modern leader like Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, who begins his mornings with an hour of meditation and reading. It's not about productivity hacks, it's about creating mental space to lead from clarity rather than reaction. That's the Stoic edge, the daily habit of stepping back to see the bigger picture before diving into the fray. So here's your challenge: choose one practice to anchor your days. Maybe it's 5 minutes of journaling with 2 prompts: what am I preparing for? and what am I grateful for? Perhaps it's a walk without headphones, letting your mind process the unresolved. The key isn't complexity, it's commitment. Like a sculptor chiseling marble, each small stroke seems insignificant until one day the masterpiece emerges. The irony, the busier you are, the more these pauses matter, because when chaos comes, and it will, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall to the level of your training. That's why Stoics didn't wait for storms to build their ships. They hammered the planks every single day, knowing calm waters never reveal a captain's skill. Your turn. Pick one habit. Start small, but start today. The leader you'll become is watching. Words inspire, but actions prove. The Stoics didn't just preach integrity. They lived it with a consistency that made their philosophy undeniable. Marcus Aurelius scrawled a reminder in his personal journal: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That simple command cuts to the heart of leadership. You can give the most stirring speech about accountability, but if your team sees you shifting blame when things go wrong, those words evaporate. Trust isn't built on eloquence. It's earned through the quiet accumulation of choices that match your principles. Consider the story of Ernest Shackleton, the polar explorer who led his stranded crew to survival after their ship was crushed by ice in 1915. He didn't rally his men with grand promises. He slept in the same frozen conditions as his crew, took equal rations, and even gave his mittens to a teammate suffering from frostbite. When supplies ran low, he volunteered for the most dangerous missions himself. Shackleton's actions screamed louder than any speech ever could. We are in this together. His crew didn't just follow orders, they followed him, because his integrity left no room for doubt. Now, contrast that with leaders who demand punctuality while arriving late to meetings, or preach transparency while hoarding information. The disconnect is palpable. Teams have a sixth sense for hypocrisy. They may not always call it out, but they'll adjust their effort to match what they observe, not what they're told. The Stoics called this syncatathesis, the idea that people align with what's demonstrated, not just declared. Your calendar, your tone in stressful moments, even how you treat the junior intern, these are the real leadership lessons you're teaching every day. So here's the uncomfortable question. If your team secretly filmed your actions for a week, would they see the values you claim to prioritize? Not the polished version you present in meetings, but the raw, unedited choices: how you handle setbacks, how you speak about competitors, how you allocate your attention. That's the mirror Stoicism holds up to leaders, because when your behavior becomes the standard, something remarkable happens. You stop needing to enforce culture. It breathes on its own, replicated in the small acts of everyone who's watching you. This isn't about perfection. Even Marcus Aurelius lost his temper. The goal is conscious alignment, noticing when your actions drift from your words, and correcting course with humility. Try this for one day. Carry a notepad and tally every time your choices reflect your stated values. Not the aspirational ones, but the ones you'd swear define you. The gap between those marks tells you more about your leadership than any performance review ever will. Because in the end, people won't remember your speeches. They'll remember who you were when the spotlight was off. And that's the legacy Stoic leaders leave, not in edicts but in example. The most liberating skill a leader can master isn't control, it's the art of letting go. Seneca captured this perfectly in his letters. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that. How much mental energy do we waste clinging to outcomes we can't dictate? The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from unhealthy attachment. It's the difference between pouring your soul into a project and obsessing over every variable you'll never command. True leadership isn't about gripping the wheel tighter. It's about knowing when to open your hands. Consider two leaders facing a product launch. One micromanages every detail, losing sleep over press reactions and market fluctuations. The other sets clear standards, trusts their team, and focuses only on what's within their influence, the quality of the work, the clarity of the message. Who thrives when setbacks hit? The one who tied their worth to external validation crumbles at the first negative review. The Stoic leader, they adapt. Because their peace wasn't mortgaged to results in the first place. Take the story of a tech founder who nearly burned out trying to approve every decision in her startup. A breakthrough came when she realized her team didn't need her fingerprints on every slide deck, they needed her vision and trust. She started delegating not just tasks but ownership. Meetings shortened, creativity soared, and when a failed partnership stung, she surprised everyone by saying, "We controlled our effort, not their response." What's next? That's detachment in action, not indifference, but fierce focus redirected to fertile ground. Here's the paradox: the less you grasp for control, the more influence you gain. Like a martial artist using an opponent's momentum, the Stoic leader channels energy into what's malleable, their strategy, their attitude, their next move. Seneca advised, "Hang on to your youthful enthusiasm, you'll need it later when you're older." He wasn't talking about clinging to the past. He meant preserving your core fire while releasing your grip on how it should ignite the world. Your challenge today: identify one area where you're confusing control with leadership. Maybe it's re-editing a colleague's work until it sounds like yours. Or refreshing your inbox every 10 minutes for updates you can't yet influence. Whatever it is, practice this Stoic reframe. I commit my effort, not my identity, to this outcome. Then watch what happens when you lead with open hands instead of clenched fists. The irony: people often rise to the trust you place in them, not the fear you try to eliminate for them. Detachment isn't surrender. It's the ultimate act of confidence, a declaration that your worth isn't held hostage by external winds. The tighter you squeeze, the less you actually hold. But the more you release, that's when you discover what leadership really means. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision that something matters more than fear. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Epictetus, who endured the brutality of slavery before becoming a philosopher, put it bluntly, "Difficulty shows what men are." He wasn't glorifying suffering, he was revealing its hidden gift. Adversity doesn't break you, it reveals you. Think of a leader like Abraham Lincoln during the darkest days of the Civil War, when the Union's fate hung by a thread. He didn't pretend the fear wasn't there. He admitted in letters to sleepless nights and crushing doubt, but he also knew this: courage isn't a feeling. It's action taken despite feeling. This is where Stoic practice turns theory into power. They called it premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of challenges before they arrive. Picture an athlete visualizing every possible setback before a race, a stumble, a rival surge, even the sting of fatigue. By mentally preparing, they transform potential panic into poise. Leaders do the same. When Lincoln practiced his speeches aloud, imagining hecklers and hostile crowds, he wasn't being pessimistic. He was immunizing himself against surprise. That's the Stoic edge. Courage grows in the soil of preparation. Now consider your own leadership. What's the fear you've been avoiding? The difficult conversation, the career leap, the bold stand that might draw criticism. Here's the uncomfortable truth: avoiding that fear isn't keeping you safe, it's keeping you small. The Stoics would argue that every time you sidestep a challenge, you're not dodging discomfort, you're missing an opportunity to forge resilience. Like a muscle, courage atrophies without resistance. Take a lesson from Lincoln's playbook. He didn't wait for confidence to act. He acted until confidence followed. When his generals failed him, when newspapers mocked him, even when his own cabinet doubted him, He kept moving not because he was unshaken, but because he'd made peace with being shaken. That's the heart of Stoic courage. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about making fear irrelevant to your choices. So try this exercise today. Name the challenge you've been postponing. Then ask, what's the worst that could happen, not as a spiral into anxiety, but as a practical drill. If that difficult conversation goes poorly, what's your next step? If that project fails, what's your recovery plan? By staring down the worst case ahead of time, you drain it of its power to paralyze. Because here's the secret every Stoic leader knows: the obstacle is never the external event. It's your belief about what that event means. Lincoln's courage wasn't legendary because he never doubted. It was legendary because he doubted and acted anyway. That's the choice in front of you right now, not to be fearless, but to lead fearlessly. The world doesn't need perfect leaders. It needs leaders who refuse to let perfection become the enemy of progress. Your moment won't wait until you're ready. It's waiting for you to decide that ready isn't a feeling, it's a commitment. True leadership isn't measured in quarterly results or viral moments. It's cultivated in the quiet persistence of playing the long game. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome for nearly 2 decades, wrote, "Time is like a river made up of events which rush past, but no sooner does anything appear than it is swept away." He wasn't dismissing urgency, he was highlighting the power of perspective. The Stoics called this macrobia, the art of seeing beyond the immediate to what endures. It's the difference between a leader who chases applause and one who builds cathedrals. Take the story of Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, who spent 2 years selling fax machines door to door while quietly developing her idea for shapewear. She faced rejection from every major manufacturer, yet kept refining her prototype. Most would have quit after the 5th no, but Sarah understood what the Stoics teach: setbacks aren't roadblocks, they're part of the curriculum. Fast forward to today, and her patience isn't just a feel-good story. It's a masterclass in how enduring vision outlasts fleeting frustration. Now contrast that with the modern obsession with shortcuts. How many overnight successes actually collapse under scrutiny? The entrepreneur who prioritizes hype over substance, the leader who sacrifices team culture for a temporary boost, these are the equivalent of building on sand. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's not morbid, it's clarifying. When you operate with the awareness that time is finite, you stop wasting energy on distractions that won't matter in 5 years. Here's the challenge: define your 5-year vision not in milestones but in character. Ask yourself, what kind of leader do I want to have become? Not just what titles or revenue, but what qualities will define my daily actions. The Stoics didn't journal about their promotions, they reflected on their virtues. That's the long view in practice, measuring progress not by external validation, but by internal alignment. Consider the Japanese concept of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The fractures aren't hidden, they are celebrated as part of the object's history. Your leadership journey will have cracks, failed projects, tough lessons, seasons of doubt, but the Stoic approach transforms those breaks into strength. Every no Sarah Blakely heard didn't weaken her resolve, it gilded her persistence with deeper resilience. So grab a notebook and sketch 2 columns, short-term wins and legacy. In the first, list what you're chasing this quarter. In the second, write what you want whispered about your leadership a decade from now. If the 2 lists don't align, you're not building, you're busy. Because the ultimate Stoic question isn't, am I succeeding? It's, am I becoming? The rest is just noise. Humility might seem like an unlikely superpower in a world that celebrates bravado, but the Stoics saw it differently, as the mark of true strength. Seneca once wrote, "I shall learn from everyone. The peasant can teach me about the soil, the sailor about the wind, the thief about locks." That's humility in action, not self-deprecation, but the quiet confidence to recognize that wisdom hides in unexpected places. Picture a CEO who publicly missteps, maybe a product launch flops or a tone-deaf comment sparks backlash. The ego-driven leader doubles down, blaming the market or the team. The Stoic leader, they stand before their people and say, "I was wrong, here's what I've learned." That's not weakness, it's the kind of courage that builds unshakable trust. History offers a striking example in Alan Mulally, the former Ford CEO who inherited a company on the brink of collapse. While rivals clung to arrogance, Mulally did something radical. He admitted Ford's failures openly, even displaying competitive vehicles in the lobby to study their strengths. His team initially balked until they saw how his humility freed them to innovate without fear. Within years, Ford became the only American automaker to survive the financial crisis without a government bailout. That's the paradox of Stoic humility. By embracing what you don't know, you create space for what you can become. Now, contrast that with ego-driven leadership, the kind that silences dissent, hoards credit, and sees every critique as a threat. The Stoics warned that ego is a fortress built on sand. It demands constant validation, exhausts teams, and blinds leaders to their own blind spots. Service-oriented leadership flips the script. It asks, how can I amplify others, instead of how can I shine? Think of a coach who celebrates their assistants' play calling, or a surgeon who credits their nurses for a successful operation. These leaders understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Rising above pettiness isn't just noble, it's strategic. So reflect on your own journey. When has humility served you? Maybe it was the time you admitted a gap in knowledge and asked a junior teammate for insight. Or when you apologized for a misjudgment and found the relationship grew stronger afterward. Those moments aren't concessions, they're evidence of a deeper truth. The more secure you are in your purpose, the less you need to prove. That's the Stoic secret. Humility isn't about shrinking, it's about standing tall enough to see beyond yourself. The next time you face a choice between protecting your image and pursuing growth, remember this: the oak tree that refuses to bend snaps in the storm. The bamboo, flexible and unassuming, weathers every gale. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about creating a space where every voice can matter, starting with the quiet courage to admit you're still learning too. Words carry weight, especially when spoken with Stoic intention. Epictetus drilled this into his students with a simple rule: first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. That's the essence of Stoic communication: precision over volume, substance over spectacle. Think of the last time someone drowned you in jargon or vague promises. Now recall a moment when just a few clear words cut through the noise like sunlight. That's the difference between filling air and igniting understanding. Take the art of negotiation. A skilled diplomat doesn't win by out-talking their counterpart. They listen intently, then respond with surgical clarity. Consider the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Kennedy's team avoided inflammatory rhetoric and instead crafted deliberate, factual messages that de-escalated tensions. Every syllable served a purpose. That's Stoic speech in action, removing ego from expression so the message can land without static. But here's where we often stumble. Modern communication rewards persuasion, convincing others we're right rather than connection. The Stoics warned against this. They called empty rhetoric sophistry, a distraction from truth. Marcus Aurelius would scribble reminders like, "Don't speak as if you're rehearsed, because authenticity can't be scripted." ever sat through a corporate presentation dripping with buzzwords but devoid of meaning? That's what happens when words become costumes instead of tools. So how do we recalibrate? Start with this audit. In your next conversation, notice when you're speaking to impress versus expressing what's genuinely useful. Are you piling on adjectives to sound authoritative, interrupting to showcase your knowledge? The Stoic test is brutal but liberating. If your words don't serve truth or benefit, they're just noise. Try an experiment today. Before speaking, pause and ask Epictetus's twin questions. Is this true? Is this necessary? You'll be stunned how much falls away. The defensiveness, the posturing, the wasted breath. What remains is pure signal, because when every word carries weight, people lean in to listen, and that's when real leadership begins. Every yes you give is a no to something else. And few leadership skills carry more Stoic weight than the art of strategic refusal. Marcus Aurelius guarded his attention like a fortress, writing, "If you seek tranquility, do less, not nothing, just less of what scatters your purpose." That razor-sharp discernment separates reactive leaders from visionary ones. Consider Warren Buffett's famous two-list exercise. Write down 25 career goals, circle the top 5, and treat the rest as avoid at all costs. Why? Because as Buffett proved, diffused focus is the silent killer of extraordinary results. History remembers the bold yeses, but often it's the wise nos that shape destinies. When Rosa Parks refused to surrender her bus seat, she wasn't just rejecting an unjust rule. She was protecting the integrity of her entire movement from dilution. Similarly, when Steve Jobs returned to Apple and slashed 70% of their product line, critics called it reckless. Yet that ruthless focus birthed the iMac, iPod, and iPhone era. Every no to mediocrity was a yes to genius. The modern workplace, though, conspires against this discipline. Open calendars invite endless meetings. Instant communication blurs boundaries. The Stoic antidote: treat your time like a finite currency, because it is. A tech CEO once shared how saying no to a lucrative but misaligned partnership preserved her team's morale and creative momentum. That single refusal became the pivot point for their breakthrough innovation. So here's your challenge. What's currently on your Buffett list? The seemingly good opportunities quietly sabotaging your great ones. Maybe it's that networking event that drains more energy than it returns, the committee seat that feels obligatory rather than impactful, even the quick favors that fracture your focus. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You own your actions, not their outcomes." By that logic, every undiscerning yes isn't just a time leak, it's a surrender of agency. Try this tonight. Audit your commitments through a Stoic lens. For each one, ask, does this align with my core mission? Does it energize or deplete? If you hesitated, that's your signal. Because mastery isn't about doing more things well, it's about doing fewer things exceptionally. And that begins with the two-letter word that builds empires: no. Adaptability isn't about abandoning principles, it's about bending without breaking, like a reed in the wind. Epictetus put it perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That simple shift in perspective transforms change from a threat into fuel. Think of a tech startup that launches with a bold vision, only to discover their product doesn't quite fit the market. The rigid leader doubles down on the original plan, pouring resources into a sinking ship. The Stoic leader, they pivot, they listen, adapt, and redirect their energy toward what's actually needed. That's not failure, it's wisdom in motion. Consider the story of Slack, which began as a gaming company called Tiny Speck. When their game flopped, they noticed something unexpected. The internal communication tool they'd built for their team was more valuable than the game itself. Instead of clinging to their original dream, they leaned into the new opportunity. Today, Slack powers workplaces worldwide. That's Stoic adaptability in action, seeing the obstacle as the way. The founders didn't just endure change, they embraced it as a compass pointing toward something better. Now, contrast that with the trap of rigid planning. There's a reason the Stoics warned against attachment to outcomes. It's not that goals don't matter, it's that the path to achieving them rarely follows a straight line. A general doesn't march their army into a storm because the map said so. They adjust their route based on the terrain. Modern agile methodologies in business echo this ancient wisdom: iterate, test, learn, and adapt. The plan isn't sacred, the purpose is. Here's where you come in. Identify one area where you've been holding on too tightly. Maybe it's a project that's no longer serving its purpose, a routine that's become stagnant, or even a personal expectation that's weighing you down. Ask yourself, what if flexibility here isn't surrender but strategy? The reed survives the hurricane not by resisting the wind, but by moving with it. That's the Stoic secret. Strength isn't just standing firm, it's knowing when to sway. Think of a time you adapted successfully. Maybe you switched careers after realizing your first choice wasn't the right fit, or adjusted a parenting approach when the old method stopped working. That wasn't inconsistency, it was intelligence. The Stoics celebrated this quality in nature: rivers that find new paths around rocks, trees that grow sideways toward sunlight. Survival belongs not to the strongest, but to the most responsive. So today, practice bending. Start small, rearrange a meeting agenda on the fly when a better discussion emerges, or scrap a plan that's not working and try a fresh approach. Notice how adaptability doesn't weaken your leadership, it sharpens it, because when you stop fighting change, you start leading it, and that's when the real growth begins. True leadership doesn't end with personal mastery. It extends outward in the responsibility to lift others as you climb. The Stoics viewed mentorship not as optional generosity, but as fundamental duty. Seneca's letters to his young friend Lucilius weren't just philosophical musings. They were meticulous blueprints for growth, filled with patient guidance and tough love. Consider this: while most Roman aristocrats hoarded knowledge as power, Seneca devoted hours each day to shaping a protege's character. That's the Stoic paradox: the stronger you become, the more you're obligated to strengthen those around you. Modern neuroscience confirms what the ancients intuited: we're wired to learn through modeling. A study of surgical teams found that when senior surgeons took time to explain their decisions in real time, junior team members performed 40% better under pressure. Like Seneca's letters, this wasn't about micromanaging, it was about creating thinking partners. The best leaders understand that their legacy isn't measured in personal accolades, but in how many people they've equipped to surpass them. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella transformed the company culture by shifting from know-it-alls to learn-it-alls, personally mentoring rising talent while encouraging veteran engineers to learn from interns. But here's where Stoic mentorship gets radical. It flows both ways. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, taught that every interaction holds lessons if we're humble enough to receive them. Imagine a seasoned executive learning coding basics from a 22-year-old new hire, or a principal shadowing a first-year teacher to understand classroom challenges. When a Fortune 500 CEO instituted reverse mentorship sessions where junior employees taught senior leaders about emerging technologies, innovation skyrocketed. The Stoics would nod knowingly: wisdom isn't hierarchical. So consider this dual challenge: who in your orbit needs your experience poured into them? Maybe it's the new colleague struggling to find their voice in meetings, or the neighbor launching a small business. And equally vital, who might unexpectedly sharpen your perspective. the barrister with insights on customer service, the retiree with decades of institutional knowledge. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." In leadership terms, the best advantage is to be perpetually teachable while relentlessly teaching. The mark of a Stoic mentor isn't creating followers, it's cultivating future mentors. Like a stone dropped in water, every lesson creates ripples beyond your sight. So ask yourself today, what wisdom have you been given that's not truly yours to keep, and whose voice, if you listen closely, might reveal your next breakthrough? That's the beautiful reciprocity of growth. We rise by lifting and learn by leading. True confidence isn't loud, it's unshakable. The Stoics drew a sharp line between arrogance, which is fragile and needs constant validation, and the quiet assurance that comes from knowing who you are. Marcus Aurelius described this as the inner citadel, a fortress of self-awareness no external opinion can breach. Picture a leader facing public criticism, not with defensiveness, but with calm curiosity. They don't scramble to prove their worth because their worth isn't up for debate. That's Stoic confidence, not the absence of doubt, but the mastery of it. Consider the difference between two leaders in a crisis. One dominates meetings with grandiose plans, dismissing concerns as ignorance. The other listens intently, acknowledges gaps, and makes decisions with steady conviction. The first is performance, the second is presence. Arrogance shouts, "I'm right." Confidence asks, "What's true?" The Stoics called this eudaimonia, flourishing by aligning with reality, not ego. When NASA Gene Kranz led the Apollo 13 mission rescue, his famous words weren't, "I'll fix this." They were, "Failure is not an option." That subtle shift from I to we reveals the heart of grounded leadership. This is where amor fati, the love of fate, transforms confidence from a trait into a practice. The Stoics didn't just accept setbacks, they embraced them as opportunities to strengthen their resolve. A modern executive facing a failed product launch might resent the loss, or they might mine it for lessons that sharpen their next move. The latter doesn't just recover faster, they emerge wiser. Think of a musician who flubs a live performance. The arrogant one blames the sound system. The confident one owns the mistake, learns, and returns with a deeper artistry. That's the alchemy of amor fati. Every stumble becomes part of the foundation. Now, here's your challenge. Identify one strength you've downplayed for fear of seeming boastful. Maybe it's your ability to mediate conflicts, spot patterns others miss, or stay calm under pressure. Today, claim it unapologetically, not to overshadow others, but to honor the work you've put into earning it. The Stoics would remind you, humility isn't hiding your light, it's knowing your flame is just one among many in the collective torch of progress. Try this reframe. Confidence isn't the opposite of self-doubt, it's the willingness to act despite it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while journaling about his insecurities, not to wallow, but to wrestle them into wisdom. Your turn. Stand in your strength without apology. Love the obstacles that test it, and let your quiet assurance speak louder than any boast, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs leaders who know the difference between making a point and making a difference. Resourcefulness begins where convenience ends, and no philosophy understood this better than Stoicism. Epictetus, born into slavery with nothing but his mind to call his own, laid down a radical challenge. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That wasn't resignation, it was alchemy. When life hands you lemons, the average person makes lemonade. The Stoic, they study citric acid, learn preservation techniques, and build a trade network with the rind. Constraints aren't cages, they're catalysts for ingenuity. Take the story of a tech startup that launched during an economic downturn. Funding dried up overnight, so they turned their tiny apartment into an office, bartered coding skills for legal advice, and used free open-source tools instead of expensive software. Within 2 years, they were profitable, not despite their limitations, but because of them. Scarcity forced creativity. Like a sculptor seeing the statue inside the block of marble, they recognized potential where others saw lack. That's the Stoic edge, viewing every limitation as a hidden invitation to innovate. Now, contrast that with the abundance mindset trap. It's tempting to think more resources guarantee better outcomes, but history proves otherwise. The Titanic had every financial advantage yet sank from hubris. Meanwhile, Ernest Shackleton's stranded crew survived 2 years in Antarctic ice with salvaged supplies and sheer inventiveness, turning seal blubber into fuel and ship planks into shelter. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Abundance often breeds complacency, while scarcity breeds mastery. Here's the pivot. Look around you right now. What untapped assets already exist in your orbit? Maybe it's that half-finished project collecting digital dust, the underutilized skill in your team, or even the network of contacts you've neglected to engage. The Japanese concept of motonai, a deep regret for waste, captures this perfectly. Waste isn't just what we throw away, it's what we fail to repurpose. Try this exercise today. List 3 constraints you've complained about recently: time, money, tools. Now brainstorm how each could become an advantage. Limited budget, it forces prioritization. Small team, faster decisions. Even perceived weaknesses can be strengths in disguise. A bakery with no storefront might dominate deliveries. A consultant with a niche focus becomes the go-to expert. The Stoic doesn't wait for perfect conditions, they perfect their ability to thrive in imperfect ones. Epictetus didn't just teach this, he lived it. Banished from Rome with nothing, he built a school that outlasted empires. His secret: treating every obstacle as raw material. Your turn. Whatever you're facing, a tight deadline, a slim budget, a skeptical audience, ask not, "What do I lack?" but, "What can I create with what's already here?" That shift doesn't just solve problems, it transforms you into the kind of leader who can build castles from crumbs. A team that embodies Stoic principles isn't just a group of individuals working together. It's a microcosm of shared purpose, where every member grows stronger by lifting others. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this interconnectedness, reminding himself that what injures the hive injures the bee. Imagine a rowing crew where each stroke sinks not just to move the boat faster, but to elevate every rower's endurance and precision. That's the heart of Stoic teamwork. Individual progress and collective resilience aren't competing ideals, they're two sides of the same coin. Take the example of a tech company that faced a catastrophic server outage during their busiest season. Instead of finger-pointing, the team rallied around a single question: how do we grow from this? Developers worked alongside customer service reps to draft transparent communications. Junior staff proposed creative workarounds while seasoned engineers mentored them through implementation. Within 48 hours, they'd not only restored service but emerged with a stronger system and deeper trust. That's Stoic culture in action. Adversity becomes the glue that binds people to a common mission. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the profound kinship that ties all people together. It's the understanding that your growth is intertwined with those around you. When a leader invests in their team's development, they're not just building skills, they're strengthening the ecosystem that will carry them all forward. Think of a forest where the tallest trees share nutrients with saplings through hidden root networks. The canopy doesn't thrive by overshadowing, it thrives by ensuring every tree reaches the light. Here's your challenge today. Choose one relationship within your team that could use reinforcement. Maybe it's the colleague who's been quietly struggling. the new hire who needs guidance, or even the rival whose friction could transform into mutual respect. Reach out with a single act of solidarity, share a resource, acknowledge their effort, or simply listen without agenda. Because the true test of Stoic leadership isn't how well you weather storms alone, it's how many ships you bring safely to harbor beside your own. The beauty of this philosophy is that it turns ordinary teams into unshakable communities. When each person adopts the mindset that their progress serves the whole, something remarkable happens. Competition gives way to collaboration, and setbacks become collective stepping stones. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule Rome as a solitary force. He leaned on trusted advisors, learned from critics, and saw himself as one thread in a larger tapestry. Your team, no matter its size, can embody that same spirit. Start with one connection and watch how the ripple transforms the pond. Criticism stings because we let it, but the Stoics saw this as a choice, not a sentence. Epictetus offered a mental switch. Remember, what insults you isn't the person who criticized you, but your judgment that it's insulting. That's the key. Opinions are like weather. You can't control them, only how you prepare. Picture a leader on stage when a product demo fails spectacularly. The crowd murmurs, headlines loom. The ego-driven response, defensiveness, blame, or worse, silence. But the Stoic leader, they step forward, acknowledge the stumble, and reframe it. This isn't the outcome we wanted, but it's the feedback we needed. Thank you. That shift from resisting criticism to leveraging it turns vulnerability into credibility. There's a reason Marcus Aurelius practiced the view from above exercise daily. He'd imagine soaring over cities, watching tiny figures quarrel and fret, recognizing how small even the loudest insults seemed from that vantage point. Modern psychology echoes this. When researchers had subjects visualize their problems as distant objects, they solved them 30% faster and with less stress. Try it now. That scathing email, that dismissive comment, picture them as leaves floating down a river. They exist, but they don't dictate the current. Consider how Brené Brown handled her infamous TED Talk criticism. When accused of oversimplifying research, she didn't attack or retreat. She published her raw data online, writing, "If I'm wrong, I want to know, because getting it right matters more than being right." That's Stoic indifference in action, detaching self-worth from the critique to extract its value. The ancient Greeks called this ataraxia, the calm that comes when you stop conflating feedback with identity. Now spotlight your own reactions. What criticism have you been carrying like a brick? Maybe it's a performance review that stung, a rejected proposal, or even an offhand family jab. Grab a pen and separate the facts from the fiction. Under fact, write the literal words said. Under fiction, note the story you've added. They think I'm incompetent. I'll never recover. See how much weight comes from your interpretations, not the event itself. Here's the litmus test Epictetus would propose. If 10 people call your idea foolish, but one whispers, "This helped me," whom do you amplify? Stoicism doesn't teach apathy, it sharpens your discernment. Like a chef tasting soup, you take in all feedback, then decide which spices to add or ignore. The power was never in their words, but in your sieve. So next time criticism lands, pause. Ask, is this about my work or my worth? The answer will tell you everything. Your attention is your most precious currency. Spend it like an investor, not a gambler. Seneca warned his students about the dangers of scattering focus. We are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers. Imagine two leaders with identical schedules. One jumps between emails, meetings, and notifications, ending the day exhausted but unfulfilled. The other guards their mornings like sacred ground, dedicating uninterrupted hours to strategic work before the world makes demand. Both are busy, but only one is building something lasting. That's the Stoic difference between motion and momentum. History's most effective leaders didn't just work hard, they worked with ruthless intention. Take the daily ritual of author Cal Newport, who practices what he calls deep work. He blocks 4-hour stretches with no phone, no internet, just a notepad and a single project. At first glance, this seems extreme until you realize these focused bursts produce more than weeks of fragmented effort. The Stoics would recognize this immediately. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to write in his journal, not because he had endless free time, but because he knew clarity is found in stillness, not chaos. Modern work culture celebrates busyness like a badge of honor, but Stoicism reveals the trap. Every quick check of your inbox, every unnecessary meeting you default to accepting, every social media scroll disguised as a break, these aren't just minutes lost. They're fractures in your cognitive armor. Research from the University of California, Irvine, shows it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully regain focus after an interruption. Think about that. 3 distractions an hour means you're never truly working at full capacity. The Stoic solution: treat your attention like a fortified city. Raise the drawbridge against trivial invaders. Here's your challenge. Identify one energy drain you've tolerated for too long. Maybe it's the default yes to every calendar invite, the compulsive news refreshing, or even the harmless group chats that fragment your day. For the next 72 hours, conduct an experiment. Eliminate it completely. No compromises, no, just this once. Notice what happens to your mental space, your productivity, even your calm. Like Seneca pruning unnecessary possessions from his life, you'll discover that subtraction isn't deprivation, it's liberation. The average person spends 4 hours a day on their phone. Reclaim just half of that, and you've gifted yourself 730 extra hours this year, enough to master a language, write a book, or train for a marathon. The Stoics didn't avoid distraction because they were disciplined. They became disciplined by avoiding distraction. Your focus isn't just about getting more done. It's about remembering who you are when the noise falls away, because in that silence you'll hear something rare and powerful, your own potential waiting to speak. Dreaming big while keeping your feet firmly planted isn't just a leadership skill, it's a survival strategy. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly in his Meditations. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet and withstand sudden and unexpected attacks. That's visionary pragmatism in a nutshell, the ability to reach for the stars while knowing exactly where your next foothold is. Take Elon Musk's approach to SpaceX. When critics said private space travel was impossible, he didn't just rely on passion. He broke the problem down using what he calls physics thinking, starting with fundamental truths: can rockets be reusable? And methodically addressing constraints: how do we reduce cost per launch? The result, a company that went from near bankruptcy to rewriting the rules of space exploration. This balance between vision and execution is what separates dreamers from doers. Wishful thinking says, someday I'll build a revolutionary company. Systematic execution asks, what's the first prototype I can build this month? Consider the Wright brothers. Their dream of flight wasn't unique. Countless inventors had tried and failed. What set them apart was their relentless focus on incremental progress. They tested wing shapes in a homemade wind tunnel, logged meticulous data, and made tiny adjustments over years. Their first flight lasted 12 seconds. But those seconds proved the impossible was achievable. The Stoics would nod in approval. They revered big aspirations but worshipped disciplined action even more. Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Notice the order: preparation first. That's why visionary pragmatism isn't about lowering your sights, it's about sharpening your process. A composer doesn't just imagine a symphony, they write one measure at a time. A marathoner doesn't fixate on the finish line, they focus on the next stride. So here's your challenge. Pick one bold goal, something that excites and intimidates you in equal measure. Maybe it's launching a side hustle, writing a book, or mastering a skill. Now apply physics thinking, break it into its smallest possible components. If your dream is to speak on stages, your first step isn't booking TD, it's recording a 1-minute video for friends. If you want to build an app, start by sketching one screen on paper. The magic happens when you treat the grand vision as your North Star, but measure progress in millimeters. History's greatest innovators all shared this trait, the humility to start small paired with the audacity to keep going. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb in one try. He found 1,000 ways it wouldn't work. The Stoics called this persistent flexibility, holding tight to your purpose while staying loose in your methods, because the real test of leadership isn't just seeing the summit. It's loving the climb. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's the raw material. The Stoics didn't just tolerate setbacks, they revered them as the whetstone that sharpens character. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming philosophy's most influential teacher, put it plainly: the obstacle is the way, not around, not despite. When 12 publishers rejected J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter manuscript, she didn't interpret those rejections as proof of her inadequacy. She saw them as evidence that she hadn't found the right champion yet. Years later, she'd reflect that rock bottom became the solid foundation on which she rebuilt her life. That's the Stoic pivot. Failure isn't a verdict, it's data. Consider how engineers approach bridge collapses. They don't shame the broken beams, they study fracture patterns to build something stronger. The Stoics called this post-mortem analysis, not to dwell on the past but to mine it for gold. A startup founder whose product flops has two choices: spiral into self-doubt or ask, what did this reveal about our assumptions? The latter approach transforms a tombstone into a stepping stone. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself like, "The impediment to action advances action. Even in defeat, there's propulsion." Here's where most stumble. We conflate evaluating failures with judging ourselves. A chef who burns a dish doesn't need to declare themselves incompetent, they need to adjust the flame. The Stoics separated the act from the actor. Your failed project doesn't define you, your response to it does. Think of Thomas Edison's famous quip about inventing the light bulb. "I didn't fail, I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That's not positivity, it's precision. Every no narrows the path to yes. Now turn the lens inward. Recall a failure you've carried like a weight, maybe a botched presentation, a rejected proposal, or even a personal misstep. Grab a notebook and dissect it with Stoic detachment. In one column, list what happened objectively. No, I'm terrible narratives, just facts. In the next, note the lessons, skills to hone, assumptions to challenge, resilience gained. That space between what occurred and what you made it mean, that's where growth lives. The most transformative breakthroughs often come wrapped in disappointment's packaging. A scientist whose experiment fails discovers a new principle. A leader who loses a key client uncovers a blind spot in their offering. Even nature works this way. Forest fires clear dead wood so sunlight can reach saplings. Your setbacks aren't stopping you, they're shaping you. The question isn't whether you'll face obstacles, it's whether you'll let them harden you like concrete or temper you like steel. So the next time life hands you a result you didn't want, channel Epictetus. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. The gap between those two. That's where the work and the magic happens. True leadership often whispers rather than shouts. It plants seeds of change through quiet persistence rather than brute force. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "A person's words will convince if their life commands respect." Think about that. No decree, no mandate, just the undeniable gravity of actions aligned with principles. Consider Nelson Mandela's 27 years in prison. He could have emerged bitter, demanding retribution. Instead, he led a fractured nation toward reconciliation, not by commanding forgiveness, but by embodying it. His cell became a classroom where he learned his oppressor's language, not to surrender, but to understand, because you can't dismantle systems you don't comprehend. That's the Stoic art of influence, transforming injustice into wisdom, then letting that wisdom ripple outward. There's a stark difference between authority and moral authority. One is granted by titles, the other is earned through consistency. A manager can enforce deadlines with threats, but the leader who stays late to help a struggling team member. They don't need threats, their example becomes the standard. The Stoics called this synkatathesis, the unconscious alignment of others to values demonstrated, not dictated. History's most enduring changes rarely came from edicts. The civil rights movement didn't triumph because laws changed first. It triumphed because ordinary people, inspired by the quiet dignity of figures like Rosa Parks, changed hearts through daily acts of courage. Laws followed the shift in consciousness, not the other way around. Now, contrast this with the modern obsession with control. How many leaders mistake compliance for commitment? A CEO who micromanages fonts in PowerPoint slides might get uniformity, but they'll never spark innovation. Meanwhile, the leader who shares their thought process openly, including their doubts, creates a culture where others feel safe to think independently. That's the Mandela effect in miniature, patience with short-term uncertainty to harvest long-term trust. The Roman general Scipio Africanus didn't conquer Carthage by barking orders. He won loyalty by marching alongside his troops, eating the same rations, and proving he'd never ask for sacrifices he wasn't making himself. So here's your challenge. Identify one area where you've been relying on positional power when influence might work deeper. Maybe it's that team member who resists feedback. Have you shown them how you've applied that same feedback to your own work? Or a family dynamic where demands create tension. Could modeling the change you want be more effective than insisting on it? The Stoic leader doesn't ask, "How can I make them listen?" They ask, "How can I become worth listening to?" Mandela's greatest weapon wasn't his title as South Africa's president. It was the 40 years of choices that made his moral authority undeniable. Systems bend to such consistency, not because they must, but because they should. Your influence grows not when others fear your authority, but when they recognize your integrity. And that kind of leadership doesn't just change policies, it changes people. Leadership at its highest level isn't a burden, it's a privilege, a chance to pour your energy into something larger than yourself. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who carried the weight of Rome on his shoulders, wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That wasn't empty optimism from a man with an easy life. It was a deliberate choice to find meaning in duty, even when duty demanded everything. The Stoics didn't glorify grinding yourself into dust. They celebrated the quiet exhilaration of work that matters. Think of a teacher grading papers late into the night, not with resentment, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing each red mark is a stepping stone for a young mind. That's the secret. Joy in leadership isn't found in avoiding effort, but in embracing effort with purpose. Consider the story of a high school biology teacher in a struggling district. Her classroom had outdated textbooks, leaky ceilings, and students who'd been labeled unteachable. Instead of resigning herself to the limits, she turned every obstacle into a lesson, literally. When the roof leaked, she taught students about water cycles. When the budget couldn't cover lab equipment, they built microscopes from smartphone parts. Years later, a former student, now a doctor, credited her not with teaching science, but with teaching resilience. That Stoic joy, the alchemy of transforming burdens into gifts. Now contrast that with the epidemic of burnout plaguing so many leaders today. The difference isn't workload, it's worldview. Burnout happens when effort feels meaningless, when tasks pile up without connection to a greater why. The Stoics knew this danger well. Seneca warned, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He wasn't scolding. He was pointing to the lifeline right in front of us, the power to assign meaning. A doctor filling out paperwork might see tedium, or they might see vital steps in healing. The work is the same, the lens changes everything. Here's your challenge: reconnect with your why, not the polished version you share in meetings, but the raw, personal one. Maybe it's the spark you felt when you first stepped into your role, or the quiet moments when you've seen your work ripple into someone else's life. Grab a pen and finish this sentence. I keep going because no grand statements, just truth. The teacher didn't stay for the applause, she stayed for the light bulb moments. The Stoics didn't endure hardship because they were masochists. They embraced it because it forged character. Your joy isn't hiding in easier circumstances. It's waiting to be uncovered in the work you've already chosen. Purpose isn't something you find, it's something you build, one intentional day at a time. Like Marcus Aurelius reminding himself that even his imperial robes were just sheep's hair dyed in shellfish blood, you have the power to strip away pretenses and see your role for what it truly is, an opportunity to serve, to grow, to leave things better than you found them. That's the Stoic zest for leadership, not despite the grind, but because of it. The fire that keeps you going isn't outside you. It's the spark you carry within, waiting to catch flame. Legacy isn't built in the spotlight, it's cultivated in the quiet moments when no one's watching. The Stoics had a term for this, philostorgia, the love of leaving things better than you found them. Epictetus, who spent his life teaching in a cramped Athenian classroom, put it simply: what's the point of planting trees you'll never sit under? You plant so future generations can breathe the shade. That's legacy thinking, the antidote to short-termism. Imagine a philanthropist who doesn't just write checks but builds systems. Take Julius Rosenwald, the Sears magnate who partnered with Booker T. Washington to fund over 5,000 schools for Black communities in the early 20th century. He didn't just donate money. He designed a model where communities matched funds, ensuring ownership and sustainability. Decades after his death, alumni like Maya Angelou and Medgar Evers would credit those schools as their launching pads. Rosenwald understood what the Stoics taught: true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you propagate. This is where memento mori, the practice of reflecting on mortality, shifts from morbid to motivational. The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress themselves, they used it to clarify priorities. Steve Jobs captured this perfectly in his Stanford commencement speech. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. When you lead as if your time is finite, every decision carries weight. A CEO allocating resources asks not just, will this boost next quarter's earnings? But will this matter in 10 years? A teacher grading papers considers not just the assignment, but the lifelong curiosity they're nurturing. Mortality isn't a threat, it's a lens that brings legacy into sharp focus. Now turn the mirror on yourself. Picture your own funeral, not to dwell on the end, but to illuminate the path. What stories would you want told? Not the titles you held or deals you closed, but the lives you changed. The Stoics would urge you to audit your days backward. Start with the epitaph, then design the life that merits it. When Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai was asked why she risked her life for education rights, she replied, "I don't want to be remembered as the girl who was shot. I want to be remembered as the girl who stood up." That's legacy thinking in action, leading not for applause but for echo. Here's the challenge: carve out 30 minutes this week to draft your own ethical will. Unlike a traditional will that distributes assets, this document distills values. What lessons do you want to pass on? What footprints do you want to leave in the sand? The Stoics weren't perfect. Marcus Aurelius wrestled with temper, Seneca with hypocrisy, but their willingness to confront their flaws became part of their legacy. Your impact won't be measured by your polished moments, but by the cracks where your light got through. Because in the end, legacy isn't about etching your name in stone. It's about planting seeds that grow into forests you'll never see. The shade isn't for you. It's for the ones who'll someday look up and whisper, "Someone stood here before." That's how Stoic leaders turn time into timelessness. Your attention is sacred ground, guard it like a fortress under siege. Seneca saw this clearly 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." That piercing observation cuts deeper today than ever. Imagine a CEO who keeps their calendar wide open, believing constant availability equals strong leadership. Now picture their counterpart who blocks 4 morning hours labeled untouchable, no calls, no emails, just deep work on strategic priorities. The first leader drowns in urgent noise while the second architects the future. That's the Stoic boundary paradox. By saying no to the trivial many, you create space for the essential few. Consider the ritual of a Fortune 500 executive who starts each quarter by defining their unnegotiable 3. Not 30 priorities 3, one for business growth, one for team development, and one for personal rejuvenation. Every request that doesn't serve these gets a polite but firm refusal. At first, colleagues bristled at the boundaries. Then they noticed something remarkable. The quality of their leaders' contributions skyrocketed when present, precisely because they weren't perpetually on call. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship. Like a farmer letting fields lie fallow to restore fertility, the Stoic leader knows uninterrupted focus isn't luxury. It's the oxygen of meaningful work. The modern workplace often confuses responsiveness with responsibility. We wear our burnout like badges of honor, mistaking exhaustion for dedication. But the Stoics drew a crucial distinction between being accessible and being intentional. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire yet journaled about guarding his inner citadel from the crowd's chaos. Today's equivalent, the leader who silences notifications during family dinners not to escape responsibility, but to honor their highest one. Presence isn't measured in minutes, it's measured in depth of engagement. A 15-minute conversation where you're fully attentive achieves more than 3 hours of distracted half-listening. Now turn the lens inward. What boundary have you been avoiding? Not because it's impossible, but because it feels uncomfortable. Maybe it's that quick question colleague who hijacks your afternoons, or the habit of checking emails before your feet hit the floor each morning. Here's the experiment. Choose one intrusion stealing your focus and build a wall around it this week. If mornings are your creative peak, block the first 90 minutes for your most important work. No exceptions. If evenings are for recharging, set an autoresponder after 6 p.m. That kindly redirects non-urgent requests. The resistance you'll feel isn't proof it's wrong, it's proof it's working. boundaries don't just protect your time, they train others how to value it. Like a sculptor chiseling away excess marble to reveal the statue within, every no reveals the shape of your true priorities. Start with one, then watch how the space you create becomes the birthplace of what matters most. Great leadership isn't built in grand declarations. It's forged in the daily grind of small, intentional choices. Marcus Aurelius knew this well, scribbling in his meditations. Waste no more time arguing what a good leader should be. Be one. That's the heart of the daily Stoic challenge, a 30-day experiment where theory meets action. Imagine starting each morning with a single question. What's one thing I can do today to lead more courageously? Not a vague aspiration, but a concrete act, like having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or publicly crediting a team member's contribution. Take the story of a tech manager who committed to this practice. For 30 days, she tackled one uncomfortable leadership task daily, from admitting a mistake in a team meeting to declining a non-essential project that drained focus. The first week felt awkward. By week 3, her team's trust metrics soared. Why? Because vulnerability, when practiced consistently, isn't seen as weakness, it becomes proof of integrity. Like a Stoic version of compound interest, these micro-actions accumulate into unshakable credibility. Here's how to begin your own challenge. Day 1. Identify one leadership friction point. Maybe it's procrastinating on feedback or resisting delegation. Day 2. Act on it, no matter how small. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait for perfect conditions to practice philosophy. He used the chaos of ruling Rome as his training ground. Your office, your home, even your commute can become your own personal Stoa. Consider the listener who transformed his workplace culture by committing to one daily, unpopular but right decision. Whether it was enforcing a no-late work policy to protect team boundaries or rejecting a lucrative client whose values clashed with theirs. At first, pushback came, but as days passed, something shifted. Colleagues began mirroring the same principles, not because they were ordered to, but because they'd witnessed the quiet power of leading by conviction. Your turn. What's your first small step? Maybe it's pausing 5 seconds before responding in meetings to ensure your words add value, or writing a handwritten note of appreciation each Friday. The scale doesn't matter, the consistency does, because leadership isn't about occasional brilliance. It's about daily showing up as the person others would willingly follow. And that's a challenge worth accepting. Leadership at its core isn't about grand gestures or flawless execution. It's about the daily commitment to showing up with clarity, grit, and purpose. We've walked through the 3 pillars of Stoic leadership: vision that cuts through distractions, resilience that transforms obstacles into fuel, and action that bridges intention with impact. But here's the truth Seneca captured centuries ago. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. This isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about building the kind of character that recognizes and creates opportunity in every moment. Think of a blacksmith forging a blade. Each strike of the hammer isn't just shaping metal, it's refining the tool's ability to hold an edge. Your leadership journey works the same way. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up one day with unshakable wisdom. He cultivated it through morning reflections, evening reviews, and a lifetime of choosing principle over impulse. The cracks in your resolve, the moments you stumble, those aren't failures. They're the forge where your strength is tempered. Now, let's make this tangible. Before this video ends, choose one lesson to put into practice today. Maybe it's pausing to ask, is this necessary, before adding to your to-do list? Or perhaps it's reframing a setback as a chance to innovate, like the tech founder who turned a product failure into a pivot that defined their company. Leadership isn't a title you earn, It's a muscle you strengthen one deliberate choice at a time. As you step forward, remember this: the Stoics weren't obsessed with perfection. They were devoted to progress. So tell me in the comments, what's the first small step you'll take to lead with more intention? Because the world doesn't need more figureheads. It needs more leaders who dare to turn philosophy into action, one day at a time. Your legacy